Hello there. This is part two of a timers video series I'm making, but it's not really about timers, honestly. We're going to use the timers we have and the code I built in the first one to make multiple objects spawn instead of just a single one. And the way we're going to do that is use lists. And because we have lists, I figure I better make that a whole new video, but we're going to use the exact same code that I was working on in Timers Part 1, so I'm going to assume that you have this code here in front of you. And what we're going to do is all we're going to do is adjust it so that we can have more bad guys than just a single one, so we've got to play with the bad guy variables. It's really not that hard. It's just people's eyes glass over when we talk about lists, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, we want these three variables and we want them to be a list of variables instead of um, three variables that can only hold one value. We want them to hold more than one value. So we have that. The other thing we have is that we have to decide how many of those things we want to have on the screen at once. So let's just say 10. Once we get this working, we could change that number to whatever number we want and it will work. So then I make a loop to initialize my list. I'm kind of saying all this fast because, oops, shouldn't say it too fast or I'll do it wrong. And in this video, we'll feature my cats meowing because they think it's time for me to feed them. So this will be great. My last video involved dogs and kids. So, S in range spawns. Okay, so we have 10 spawns. We want this loop to run 10 times. We want to initialize what the starting values are. A minute ago, this said false. That was for one value. Now what we want to do is we want to say false for all those values. So we have bad on, and we have to append the word false to it, and we want to do that 10 times so that we have 10 falses. And we have bad x, and we want to append 0 so that we have 10 things starting at position 0. Bad y, we want 10 things starting at position 0 and the y value. Okay? So, hey, that's all we really had to do in order to create the variables. Now, anywhere where we see bad x and bad y or bad on, that's where we have to say, oh, we can't use those anymore. We have to make sure that they are lists. So we go in here, and we're just going to basically copy this line if S in range spawns. We're going to say that a lot. So if, wow, okay. Those of you who have been wondering what in the world I was just typing there, 4. 4 is the word we want. Good night. Okay, I'm sorry. 4. 4S in range spawns. If S in range. The answer would be yes. Yes, it is. Or what are you talking about? S. So, okay, now we're going to put bracket S. So we have to run through every single one and say, is it on? And if it's on, we want to draw it on the screen. And where do we want to draw it on the screen? We want to draw it on the screen at position X and Y. So we add a for loop, we indent the if statement, and then we create the variable S as the list item that it's looking at inside bad on, bad X, and bad Y. One more thing that we could do, instead of saying the word spawn right here, I just want to say the string of S. In other words, I want it to show me the number that it's just creating. Now, when you create this, what I'm hoping you'll do is you'll take this and you'll comment it out and you'll put awesome graphic here using canvas draw image, and you'll draw a bunch of cool images. Like if we were doing whack-a-mole, you would want to draw a mole instead of putting a number, right? But we are just going to put a number so I can prove to you that it's working and that you can see a bunch of different things popping up on the screen. I know you want to hit play. Oh, it's working. It's doing exactly what we need it to. Oh, error. Because we have some problems yet in our tick. All right, so we can't quite do it yet because we have this going on. And then we can't quite do it yet because we have to fix our collision. So just give us a minute and we'll do it. Here's what's happening. We are creating a number from 1 to 10. We are seeing if that number is a 1, and if so, spawning. Now this is for one thing. We want to do this for 10 things. So every time it clicks, for S in range, spawns. Every time it clicks, we want to create a random number, and we want that random number to be, if it's a 1, we want to turn on that particular bad guy. So that's all we should have to do. Now, because there's 10 of them, and each one has a 10% chance of spawning, I would expect about one number to show up every second, or every time it ticks, I should say, and every time it ticks is half a second, every half a second, right? We have a 1 out of 10 chance of one of them showing up. And the second thing that's going to happen is they're going to show up at the exact same place. They're all going to show up right in the middle, so that's no good. So we should probably change that. So let me just say random randint, and why don't we just make this a completely random place to spawn. And I gave instructions last time on how you might want yours to show up. And I'm going to give you some tips again on how to deal with multiple things showing up. But for right now, this is enough. The only thing is, probably I would change this number to something else because they're going to show up too quickly. But we're not going to worry about that right now. See this global? I'm going to leave it there, but it could work without it now. Okay, I'll just comment it out. Because these are now very lists, and lists are automatically global. We don't actually need them to exist in a global anymore. Okay, so remember these numbers are randomly being generated and spawning, and you'll see some of them move, right? The number 8 right here is right here right now. If it decides to spawn the number 8 in a new location, the one I'm looking at is the one not moving. There it is. Okay. Oh, now it's up there. And as soon as I click, I get an error message. But, you know, it goes through the numbers and it says, do I want to move that number to a new location? Because every time it decides to move it, creates a new random location. So I got those numbers popping up all over the place. It starts with just a few of them, and then eventually we'll get all the numbers on the screen and they'll all be moving and spawning in different locations. Yeah. And, of course, you're going to want to see what happens if you do more spawns. All right, I told you they would happen too quickly and I'd want to slow down the spawn, right? Because every half a second it's going to decide whether 100 different numbers should be put on the screen. So there's going to be a lot of numbers. So that's, that's all we have to do to make multiple bad guys appear, which is pretty awesome. There's one more thing we should fix if we were playing whack-a-mole. We want to be able to click on every single one of those guys, and we can't just do that through, because we're using a list, so we again have to get rid of we can get rid of the global, and we do our fancy 4S in spawn. Ah, there I go again. And everywhere that we have a bad X, a bad Y, or a bad on, we're going to use bracket S. 1, 2, 3, 4 spots on that line, 1 spot on this line. Now, if I'm going to go through the trouble of clicking on all these things, I want a score. So now I'll go back and I'll global a score so that I can get credit for all this great clicking I'm doing, right? the top of the screen somewhere. I need a score equaling 0. And here where I show the how much time I have, I also want to show how many points I'm getting. What did I do wrong now? I didn't indent my thing when I added the for loop. Fix a quick indent, hit play. Oh, I've got all these numbers yet. Now, my clicking might not be great yet. Oh boy. And I should probably make less numbers. But I can get scores. So, okay. Let me make my spawns down to 10 again. Ah! See, they move, so it's tricky. But if I click them, they turn off, and I get a point. And that is how you could kind of create a whack-a-mole, except a whack-a-mole you just want to control where they show up more often. You don't want them all over the screen like this, unless you think it's fun. And then you do make them all over the screen like this, right? And you would just adjust. Oh, I just ran out of time. So I could see the problem with my timer. I just stop everything. Is that it's not nice because it just goes away and I can't see what my score was before it goes off the screen. And so that's no good. So maybe I wouldn't take off the frame, but I would stop the timers or something like that. And so that's all I have. There's Whack-A-Mole. Change it to graphics. Maybe make them show up in only particular locations. And you've got yourself a game. Sweet. See you later.